I love when the late night jokes are rapid fire like they were yesterday. They are again today. Today's topic: the annual Conservative Political Action Conference kicks off this week in Orlando, Florida. Are you excited? This is not a joke. I'm just telling you what we're talking about. At that conference, Republican leaders will discuss the future of their party. The theme of the conference is America Uncanceled. And now the joke, Stephen Colbert. I didn't know America was canceled, although I'm not surprised. The last season was pretty unbelievable. Right? That we should just stop. Great joke, Stephen Colbert. Colbert again. Of course, with all the crises facing our nation, conservatives are focusing on the most pressing issue of all, fascists being kicked off Twitter. Kimmel, it's like Comic-Con for neocons and neo-Nazis too. Colbert, it's a who's who of who needs that many guns in their rec room. Colbert, still better than last year's CPAC theme, giving the flag the clap. Colbert, according to CPAC, it's time to stand up for Americans whose views have gotten them canceled, which is why they kicked off things by canceling an appearance from one of their panelists for a history of making anti-Semitic claims. Good. Conservatives don't want to be associated with anyone like that. It could sully the good name of the mob with aluminum bats trying to murder Mike Pence. Colbert's writers are going to win today, I think. Kimmel, they tweeted, "We have just learned that someone we invited to CPAC has expressed reprehensible views." Only one? Colbert, the canceled man in question is a rapper named Young Pharaoh, who was pulled from the lineup after journalists pointed out his record of publicly rejecting the existence of Judaism outright. Okay, pretty bold stance to reject the existence of the world's oldest monotheistic religion. They've been around for a while, and they write it all down. It's kind of their thing. Kimmel, Young will not be appearing at CPAC after he tweeted, "Judaism is a big lie that was created for political gain." Oops, sorry, Jared. Sorry, Ivanka. Colbert, you know who could tell Young Pharaoh that Judaism exists? Old Pharaoh. That's a pretty famous old book about it. There's even a new book about it. Wonderful joke, Colbert. And Colbert one more time. CPAC apparently hadn't known about Young Pharaoh's history of anti-Semitism and called his views reprehensible, saying they have no home with their conference. Yeah, conservatives would never doubt the existence of Jewish people. Otherwise, who's operating the space laser? I was driving around listening to my own podcast. I have a huge ego. Plus, I do that for QC. That's quality control, for those of you not hip to the language. I want to make sure that I didn't blow an edit or something. So usually when I hit the donuts chain in the morning, I listen back. And as I was listening to yesterday's show, something I had said in the podcast got me thinking, hey, what's the best stand-up special of the year? It was when I referenced Sam Jay being one of the great specials last year. I don't think we've had anything that's registered yet. I'm sure I've told you about some specials, but nothing is clicking in my brain. If you said to me right now, hey, what was the best comedy special of 2021? Did Sam Morril put out something on YouTube? Did Dale Alexander? I don't actually know. Well, there is a new one. It's from Brian Regan. It's called On the Rocks. It's on Netflix. Vulture didn't like it. They write, Brian Regan's new Netflix special On the Rocks, taped in October 2020, is not about COVID at all. It's not about COVID or the experience of living through 2020 or Trump or climate change. It's not about cancel culture or pronouns or race or money. It was filmed in an outdoor arena filled with a huge mask-wearing audience. Regan's special is an hour that attempts to travel to another time and place entirely. He tells sturdy economical jokes with a minimum of unnecessary bulk. He pulls faces, mostly to point out that the person he's building a joke about is stupid or boring. He throws in neat, efficient loops back to earlier stretches of material, little bits of returning joke spurs to create a neat taut pattern. It's a writing style that's orderly and functional, not smug. Taken together, Regan's ahistorical material, his closed system jokes, and his big silly faces come together with a special that his audience might respond to in two different ways. It's like a hermetically sealed world apart from the one we're currently living in, something I'm sure lots of people want. Who wants to be reminded of why this whole thing takes place in an outdoor arena? Who wants to think about why the few audience shots are full of people wearing masks? Of the few comedy specials released over the last year, most have woven COVID into the jokes at least a little. This is not a good review so far, right? Vulture writes, Regan's proposal is that we'd all prefer to ignore it. He praises the beauty of the venue without saying anything else about why the special is filmed there. His one tiny reference to the general state of the world is to point out his new gray hair. That joke, COVID hit, I went into hibernation and came out a senior citizen. And here's where Vulture really hammers it home, saying, except this isn't an hour that was produced in a magical place beyond the dire circumstances of the rest of the world. Sure, this performance for this one special may have been relatively safe, But in order to get ready for this one performance, Regan spent much of 2020 touring, headlining at clubs across the country, and posing maskless with fans in tight indoor spaces. It's an escapist hour produced in a way that could not escape the most obvious end result. Regan was diagnosed with COVID in December. Maybe he didn't infect anyone. Maybe his performances from around the country didn't result in any dire outcomes for his fans, the club managers, the waiters, the support staff, or maybe they did. Regan has recovered from COVID, and we don't know. The experience of watching such a deliberately escapist comedy special is harder to enter into when its creator made the special by attempting and failing to ignore reality. Escapism is a luxury Regan is clearly hoping to gift his audience. Luxuries have a cost, though. Not sure if On the Rocks is worth the price. Yikes! Vulture did not enjoy Brian Regan's new special, On the Rocks. Now, for me, as a bit of a comedy snob, if I'm sitting down on the couch and I see a new Brian Regan special, honestly, nothing against Brian Regan. I'm probably not going to click it, even though I host this podcast every day. I feel like I know what Brian does, and Brian does what Brian does well. But you mix that with this review, and I got a lot of streaming services. I got plenty to do. Maybe I'll check it out on the weekend. We'll see. Have you ever wondered what goes through a comedian's mind when they tell a joke that doesn't work? It's the art of bombing. Back to my comedy snobbery. I kind of like when a comic bombs. I think the true comics are the ones that can pull it out. I'm a big Johnny Carson fan. Some of his best monologues were when the jokes just weren't landing and he would mug for the camera or talk to the band or make fun of himself or make fun of the writers and try and pull it out. It was great. So I want to tell you about the Art of Bombing podcast. Whether you're an aspiring comedian or a hardcore comedy nerd, which you might be if you listen to this podcast every day, the Art of Bombing podcast has something for everyone. Comedian Dan Bublitz Jr. is your host. He sits down with comedians like Dusty Slay, Andy Erickson, Alonzo Bowden. By the way, I'm going to talk a lot about Alonzo on this podcast on Saturday, and I know that because my plan is to record this podcast you're hearing now and then Saturdays right after, and I've got Alonzo on the notes. But I digress. Dan Bublitz Jr., as he sits down with comedians like Dusty Slay, Andy Erickson, Alonzo Bowden, and more to discuss what can be learned from ugly shows on the road. The Art of Bombing podcast takes an in-depth look at bombing on stages around the world to turn failure into success, perhaps with a laugh or two along the way. New episodes every Tuesday. Get useful comedy insight, entertaining stories of bombing and failure told by the comedians that lived through them. Yeah, don't you wonder, you're up there and you're like, all right, this is going to crush, and then you eat it. I love that term, by the way. You eat it. New episodes every Tuesday, available wherever you get your podcasts. For more information, check out the website artofbombingpod.com or just grab the Art of Bombing podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and they sponsor today's daily comedy news. If you're up late tonight, it's a pretty good night of comedians on television. Eddie Murphy, he's on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon at 11:30. I don't know why I had to say The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, and I could have just said Fallon. Kevin James is on the Conan O'Brien television program. That's 11 o'clock on TBS. The Jimmy Kimmel Live television program has Steve Harvey, and David Spade is on with Seth at 12:30. Remember Jon Stewart? He used to be on Late Night. He has lined up the key creative team for his upcoming Apple Current Events series. And let me tell you about this, and I'll lead with my opinion. I don't think this is what any of us are going to want from Jon Stewart. From Variety, Brenda at Hikari, Chelsea Devons-Hez, and Lori Baranek have all joined Jon Stewart's Untitled show. Hikari will serve as an executive producer and showrunner. Devonetz is the head writer, Baranek the executive in charge of production. But here are their credits, and these are great credits. I'm not sensing The Daily Show Part 2 here or Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, Jon Stewart. Hikari is a highly regarded news producer who worked with Diane Sawyer, David Muir, Nora O'Donnell, and Scott Pelley. So that's very newsy, right? She won a 2020 Edward R. Murrow Award for Best Newscast. That's awesome. Devonetz has a history with Stewart, having started her writing career on The Daily Show. Okay. Baranek has worked in TV for over 2 decades. Recent credits include The Letterman Thing on Netflix, which, again, is funny, but not like Late Night with David Letterman funny. The Break with Michelle Wolf, The President's Show, and Nightly Show with Larry Wilmore. Stewart's Apple series will explore topics that are part of the national conversation, as well as Stewart's advocacy work. Sounds like it's going to be kind of serious. It sounds like it's going to be the part of John Oliver's show where I go, all right, we're too much in the weeds here. This is too serious for me. I'm out. Love Jon Stewart. I don't know. I was saying the other day, we could really use Jon Stewart in his prime back in late night, like doing like his thing. Like Oliver, like really walks up to that line, but it's only once a week. Boy, having Jon on there 4 days a week would be awesome, but that's in the past now. From Chortle, more names have been revealed for BBC Two's new stand-up showcase. This is part of the corporation's Festival of Funny, which was announced last week. The as-yet untitled series will be taped from a COVID-safe London location next week. Joining the lineup are a bunch of names us Yanks don't know. Brits, tell me if these people are funny. I'm sure they are. If they're part of BBC Two's new stand-up showcase, they are Sarah Pascoe, Kiri Pritchard McLean, Judy Love, Zoe Lyons, Catherine Bohart, and Nabil Abdul Rashid. They join the previously announced Jason Manford, Joe Brand, Darian Harriott, Dane Baptiste, Joanne McNally, Chris McCausland, and Rachel Fairburn. I'm going to be honest with you, out of that whole crew there, I'm like slightly-ish familiar with Nabil Abdul Rashid. And by slightly-ish, I mean like slightly-ish more than probably you are, only because I do this every day and I remember seeing the name. I'm not saying these people are bad. I'm just saying I live in New Jersey. The shows will air over 5 consecutive nights, with each episode featuring a headliner and 3 up-and-coming acts, promising cutting-edge material. A BBC spokesman says the series will support comedians in getting back to work and also provide a platform for emerging comedy talents who have not been able to follow their usual path of showcasing their work over the last 12 months. The shows will be recorded in front of a virtual audience over Zoom. I mentioned I drive around and I play the podcast back. This is going to be 3 days in a row now that I'm talking about The Simpsons. I had said on yesterday's podcast that I should look up about Mrs. Krabappel. Did she change her name when she married Ned Flanders? I don't think so. I'm not seeing any evidence of that. If you're a big Simpsons fan and you know something else, let me know. But I did learn some fun facts about Mrs. Krabappel. She lived at 82 Evergreen Terrace, but later moved to 744 Evergreen Terrace after marrying Ned Flanders. So Evergreen Terrace apparently is like a really long block. Edna and Ned lived on the same side of the street, right? The even side of the street, but 82 to 744? That's a long block. Edna Krabappel was 41 years old when she passed away. She was originally married to Mr. Krabappel, love it, who apparently ran off with their marriage counselor after their marriage struggled. That is so sad. Edna was later engaged to Seymour Skinner, who she almost married in season 15, but then married Ned Flanders when they got together at the start of season 22 and married in season 23, and they remained together until Edna's death. We don't know why she passed away. What we see is, in season 25, episode 13, Ned and Edna dance the tango, but then we learn that that's a dream that Ned is having when he wakes up. He's wearing a black band, suggesting he is mourning his second wife. Her photo is in a frame next to that of his dead first wife, Maud. We hear Ned Flanders say, "I sure do miss that laugh." Did I depress you enough? Did you vote yet in Comedy's Top Dog? Today's your last day, because I got to tally the votes. Votes are a little light this week. Step it up, people. Go to Instagram at Daily Comedy News, and there's a Top Dog graphic thing that I made, and there's a picture of the defending champion, who is John Mulaney, and the challenger, Adam Sandler. What you do is, in the comments for that post, you tell me who you want to vote for. 1997 Titans 74 commented, John Mulaney. So that's a vote for John Mulaney, adding, Sandler hasn't been funny since he left SNL. Wait, Sandler hasn't been funny since he left SNL? What about when he was on SNL? I'm on Team Mulaney. 5 Yodi Ugly commented, Mulaney. All right, 2 votes for Mulaney this morning. But if he's up against Sarah Cooper next week, I'm done voting. Hold on, 5 Yodi Ugly. Do you think my secret plan here, do you think you have figured out my secret plan was to manipulate the audience into voting for Adam Sandler so that I could do an Adam Sandler bit on the podcast and kill some time, and then match Adam Sandler up against Sarah Cooper so I could double down on the bit? Do you think that's what I was going to do? Boy, you pay attention. Maybe that was the plan. Maybe it was. Probably was. Adam Sandler versus John Mulaney. You guys should vote. Mulaney crushing Adam Sandler. I thought you liked this Adam Sandler guy. All right. If you don't want me to do the bit, John Mulaney is going to be the champion. Last day to vote, Instagram at Daily Comedy News. I know you guys like hearing about my coffee. Back on the caramel again this morning. As I was walking out of the donuts chain at